Welcome to Nifty Novelist. Today's writing tip is we'll be discussing the first element of the four writing elements. The four writing elements are action, description, dialogue, and narration. But today we'll be discussing the first one, which is action. Now, many people have the wrong idea about what action is as it pertains to writing books. Action is not always thrilling fistfights, gunfights, car chases, or explosions. Action simply means that something is happening to someone, somewhere, at some time. Now, this can be as simple as a person getting up to get a cup of coffee or something. It's not action-packed. There's no explosions on his way to get to the cup of coffee. Nobody's trying to kill him as he's getting to the cup of coffee. But it is still action because he is doing something. He is going to get the coffee, and that requires movement of some kind to get to the cup. Physically, he has to stand up and walk and get to the coffee, and that's action. Now, too little action in the story is too boring, and your readers will lose interest and stop reading your book and read someone else's book because there's too little stuff that's going on, and it just gets dull and nothing's happening, so they just stop reading. But at the same time, too much is too distracting, and your readers will feel like they're on a literary caffeine binge, and everything will be frenetic and at a very fast speed because the non-stop, never-ending action will give them an intense migraine headache, and they'll stop reading too, and they'll feel like they'll need a Tylenol or something like that. Now, what you need to do is use the right balance of action in between not enough action and too much action. Try to find a middle area where it's just the right amount of action, and your action must be meaningful with the purpose of adding to the overall story, not necessarily to the plot. It doesn't have to advance the plot every single time with every single act of action, but it does have to have some sort of use for being in the story in some sort of way, like helping people identify with the characters. Even meaningless chit-chat is not meaningless when you add into the factor of meaningless chit-chat happens in real life too, so it adds to the realism. So it can be there, but use it sparingly and intelligently and prudently. Now, take the advice of the novelist Ernest Hemingway. Never confuse movement with action. Movement can be action in the story, but don't confuse the two too much into thinking that movement, like running around and jumping around and blowing things up, is necessarily the kind of action that you want to have in a story, because sometimes it's just mindless explosions going off is not really adding to the story. It's just really subtracting to it overall. Today we'll be reading some of my poetry because in addition to being a novelist, I am also a poet. I am wearing my poet shirt today that says poet on it. And today's poem written by me is called Moment of Forgiveness. It is a poem about forgiving someone and healing effects that forgiveness can have on someone's soul and someone's spirit when they forgive someone that's been hurting them for a while, and replenishing that forgiveness brings. This was written back on June of 2008. But it's still relevant today because forgiveness is always helpful no matter what time of year or how long it's been. Forgiveness is always helpful and always beneficial. Now I'll read the poem for you. You did some really bad things that weren't right. I don't know for sure where you are right now, but tonight has brought the moment that I am choosing to forgive you. You darkened my world, painted pitch black my heart. I didn't know you before that day. Did you know how much I'd hurt? The poison that came just by thinking your name corroded my joy away, allowing only blame to remain. Fragments of my hate lingered like shards of bitterness. The memory of you pushed them into my soul, turning its waters toxic. But now the waters have been purified, purged of all the resentment once inside. The feelings, oh, the feelings of delight, behold them as I forgive you tonight. And now it's time for the Word Treasure Challenge, where I draw a random word out of this box and I make up a story on the spot. And today's word is hard. There was once somebody who liked doing things the hard way, and they would purposely try to do the hardest thing possible in the hardest way possible, just for fun and just for the adventure, because they thought that difficulty brought excitement to their lives, and so they tried to purposely get them into situations where everything was hard, but then they realized that although difficulties can be exciting, at the same time there's also a need for simplicity and for easiness sometimes, and that there always has to be a good balance between adventure of the difficulties but also the relaxation that comes from not having difficulties. And so they realized that they needed to not do so many hard things, and so they started doing things the easy way, and everything turned out great. That's today's story. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.